Hello, welcome to Pod Maverick After Dark. You are joined by Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe. We are editors over at Mavs Moneyball. It is 9:47 on Valentine's Day. The Dallas Mavericks just beat the pants off the San Antonio Spurs 116-93. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I got an air mattress behind me in my office. It's a lovely background visual for any of y'all that are checking out the podcast visually. Very professional, but I'm doing good. Hey, real life is real life. The All-Star break is here. Hallelujah. And so that's going to probably reflect in what we're talking about tonight.
That's really it. I mean, the Mavericks have now won 6 straight. The longest win streak in the NBA, along with their longest win streak of the season, which is really something. And this game was a weird one. The Spurs tend to come out swinging and firing against the Mavericks, and Victory Wembanyama, rookie of the year candidate, came out early and really just sort of along with Jeremy Sohan, really made life difficult for the Mavericks. They scored 32 points in the first quarter. Looked like the Mavericks defense from yesteryear. Second quarter, kind of much of the same. Luka looked a little lifeless, to be quite candid, at times, which, it's the game before All-Star break. I wasn't entirely surprised by that. Right. The third, the game kind of rounded into form at the end of the second quarter. Kyrie Irving, in particular, really took over. This was a Kyrie Irving game for the books. Just a really riotously funny performance. 15 of 22 shooting, 34 points. Did not get to the free throw line. Wow. Also had 9 rebounds and 7 assists and a pair of steals. That's and a couple. Kyrie. I mean, he had a move over a Victor Wembanyama that's going to get played for the rest of the year. It was so crazy. And he was just really in his bag in terms of the ball, just feeling like it was a part of him as you watch him dribble. And so that was pretty nice, which then, allowed kind of Luka to kick things off a little bit more on offense. The defense for the whole team in the second part of the second quarter into the third quarter was really, really, really good. It's like the turnaround for this game at one point. The Spurs led by as many as 15. The Mavericks led by as many as 29. For those of you who are a little bit math inclined, as I am upon occasion, that is a 44-point swing. Like, that's hard to do in an NBA game, though the Dallas Mavericks have been on the other end of it, having given up something like that. And so I'm sure some of you guys are wondering why in the heck Josh and I started, but almost half an hour early. Well, it's because this game was done. Like, they were... This game ended in a tight 2 hours. That does not happen. So, there's a lot of fun stuff we can talk about. I've kind of been rambling just because I wanted to recap kind of the game for everybody, but this game was over with like 15 or, less than 5 minutes into the third quarter. It was great.
Yeah, it was almost like the Washington game a couple days ago, except the Mavericks didn't realize kind of who they were playing at the Washington game until it felt like the fourth quarter was when both teams kind of showed their true colors, and the Mavericks pulled away and won with a dominant fourth. This time it didn't. It just took till the second quarter. It was just one quarter it took, and then it felt like, and then it was these teams started looking like the teams that they are, because it not to take away anything from the win. The Mavericks need to stack wins any way they can, and beating bad teams is something they didn't do last year. But it's hard to emphasize enough that like the Wizards and the Spurs, like the Wizards, Spurs, Trailblazers, Hornets, and Pistons are not only like the 5 worst teams in the NBA, they would all be contenders for the worst team in the league at any point in like the last 5 years, and they're all in one season. So,
which is
that's
wild
why
because there's not anybody worth tanking for.
no,
They're just all really bad teams.
it's supposed to be one of the worst drafts in a while, and that's why like you look at the Western Conference and you just like, oh my God, look at all these teams. Like, look at all these win totals. It's like, what's happening? And it's like, yeah, because there's basically 5 teams that give you a guaranteed
Everybody's
win.
still trying.
Yeah. So like those 5 teams are giving you like almost automatic wins. Of course, it's not automatic. Those teams have won a couple games, but yeah, they expended a lot of physical and I think emotional energy in that Thunder game. Like they're riding high off the trade deadline. To go from that to be like, oh, now you have to play these 2 stinko teams. You're at home, like you're not traveling, so you're comfortable, and your vacations are coming up. The one vacation you get, in season is happening in a couple days. Like human nature is, wow, like, okay, let's just I'm ready to go to the beach or whatever. I mean, I know I do that at my job when I'm a couple of days away from PTO and there's not much on my plate. So I'm not like, I'm sure that there were some Mavs fans that were pretty concerned about the efforts to start this game and start the Washington game. But like people have to understand over the course of an 82 game season, all teams do look like this against bad teams occasionally. You just start out slow because you're not juiced up to play one of the best teams in the league. It's just kind of human nature. What matters is, do you take care of business by the end of it? And that's what they did. And they definitively won this game. So, no harm, no foul, really.
Yeah.
In my book. Like you just got to get to the All-Star break at this point. Like you just
I think if one of our complaints about Kyrie Irving this year has been that there are times when he simply won't take control when the Mavericks need some juice. And that was what he did tonight in a big, big way. And you obviously see it reflected in the stat line. But like his energy is a little bit more palpable and translates to other players differently than when Luka is cooking because it's so much faster. He's attacking in transition. He's doing he's doing things in the lane that are a little more just frankly, I don't want to just for a guy of his size, like again, the layup that he took over Wemby, if he's 6, I know he's listed as 6'3. I think he's about 6'1. If he's 6'1 and Wemby's 7'4, that is a 15-inch difference in a play in players. Like, and that's just incredible, not to mention arm length. And so some of the shots he was getting off were really incredible. And that really seemed to spur a lot of their defensive efforts, which is nice. And I had a nice time kind of, I'm not going to sit here and act like I watched this game all that specifically. I really spent a significant portion of the fourth quarter on Instagram. Just kind of one of those games. And, you look through the box score, obviously, one of the kind of more interesting minutia based things was Daniel Gafford getting the start over Lively, who had a minutes restriction. Don't know what that minutes restriction was because Lively played 8 minutes. The plus minus is pretty funny in this game where Gafford was clearly in there early when the Mavericks were getting their butts kicked. But he still ended up with a +2. But at one point it was pretty deep. But that's, like plus minus is not a great individual stat. It's just like game to game stuff. I think sometimes we use it to make a point, but sometimes that point can be, as my friend Blake on Twitter noted, it's like sometimes that point is not correct. And Gafford ended up having a really nice game statistically. Grabbed 10 rebounds, 10 points. That's fantastic. It's like the starting center, when you throw Lively's number in there, the starting center position for the Dallas Mavericks had 15 points and 18 rebounds to go along with 4 blocks. Like you take that, you're thrilled by it. And that's what I think Mavericks fans have to look forward to as the season goes on into the second, not really the second part, but like kind of the last third of the year.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see what they do coming out of All-Star break. Because presumably Lively will be, I would hope that he would be closer to off that minutes restriction and maybe closer to full strength. I have not broken my nose, so I cannot attest to what he's going through.
How many broken noses does this team have? I
think they lead the league. That's some advanced data. I don't know. But yeah, I'll be curious to see, I wouldn't think Gafford would start. Like, it would be really weird for Lively to kind of like lose his job while he was hurt because I mean, he was really like, he was really one of the only Yeah, he
into
was really
holding things together.
Yeah, it's not like yeah, he was one of the few good things that were going when this team was 26 and 23. Basically like a week ago, and there was concerns about the bottom falling out again. He's been as steady as Luka or Kyrie have been when he's been healthy. So I can't imagine, and he does some things that I think are better than Gafford that makes sense in the starting lineup. And really, whatever they decide to do, it is just nice to see, like, having those two kind of form like a Voltron, just having that across a 48-minute game, being able to go to those options. And Dwight Powell only played 3 minutes, and I don't think Maxi Kleba played tonight. So the fact that you're able to get by with no Maxi and Dwight not having to play really at all, and you're still able to win comfortably and get the production you need out of your big men position. I mean, that's kind of a luxury the Mavericks haven't had in what would you say, since 2011? It feels like, when they had Tyson,
immemorial.
When they had Tyson and Brendan Haywood. So yeah, that's nice. I think Lively's defensive activity, and even as a 20-year-old, I think he's a better defender than Gafford, despite maybe the shot blocking numbers, whatever they say they are. But that's not a knock against Gafford. If he's coming off the bench, he's going to be a really productive backup bench big. So that was good to see. And really, I think the main point of these games, this win streak, and I know, none of, really only the OKC game was against a really quality opponent, but there's a couple nice little trends. One, the Mavericks have basically won 3 straight games without lighting it up from 3. They were 15 of 38 against OKC, which is good percentage, but in 15 threes is a decent amount, but it's not like a crazy outlier, like scorching hot game. And then their last 2 games, 25%, 36% from 3. This just didn't happen. It doesn't matter who the opponent was. If the Mavericks were shooting 25% from 3 or 36%, they were losing to whoever they played last season, or even the season before that. They just could not win games without making threes. So I think that's who knows what it looks like when the schedule turns up, when they come out of the All-Star break and they play some better teams. But I feel like that's something that they might be able to build upon now that it's happened a couple of games in a row.
I think that's right. Also, something to kind of pay attention to too is percentage of 3-pointers as part of their shot diet. It's not just the percentage made; it's also the percentage of shots taken. And tonight, they took 30 of 84. They've kind of they've treaded close to 45 to 50%. I believe. Could be totally wrong here, but I'm very interested in that one. All right, give me just a second here, Josh. So those of you who are in the stream, welcome. Please consider going and liking the show while you're in here. I would very much appreciate that. While you're down there, if you consider subscribing to the show, Josh and I are a mere 40 subs away from 2,500. Might not seem like a big deal, but we've only been doing this since April, which last April was a really stupid time to start a Dallas Mavericks YouTube show when the team was utterly garbage. But those of you who've been following our show for a while know that Josh and I have had some interesting situations with this podcast over the last year. Well, as everybody knows, I try to host as many of these secondary post-game shows where you guys can me as possible. I don't think I'm going to do one tonight. I'm a little looking forward to getting ahead on a little bit of my own all-star rest, but my wife and I are actually sleep training the baby. So there's I woke up 4 times between midnight. It's like the baby was sleeping great, and then it's like we're gonna start sleep training for real, and following some, and then it just went to crap. But no one cares about my problems. Those of you who are listening on audio streams, if you would do me a favor and consider leaving a review and leaving a comment, those sorts of things on all those applications would be very great for this. Those of you who are watching the video a little bit later, consider liking this the show and going ahead and leaving a comment. Really love reading some of these comments. Some of them are absolutely hysterical. One last note before I cut to some ads. Our overseas listeners are letting me know that they're actually not getting ads. I appreciate those of you who are reaching out to me on this. I think that has something to do with the distribution platforms, where people overseas are probably not getting the ads because they're American targeted ads. That would be my assumption, by the way. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to me spew for a few minutes. Josh and I will be back after a very short break. Okay, that always takes longer than I intended it to, but I can't help myself. So I wanted to read you something from Brad Townsend. that was yesterday morning that just it sort of ruined my morning. Maxi Kleba's play and activity level has been much improved the past 2 weeks. After last night's game, he said he dislocated his pinky toe previously, and it popped out 4 times, causing him to miss 35 games of a 36-game stretch. He now inserts a metal plate in his toe or in his shoe to stabilize his toe. My God, how gross is that?
Cyborg Maxi.
I feel a little bad now for being like, what the fuck?
We were all wondering what kind of HGH was in his system. It's not that. He's a robot now. He has become machine, metal and a machine.
I'll take it. And I'm pretty sure he's out tonight for a broken nose. Like it said toe recovery on the injury report, but it also said broken nose.
Good Lord. Yeah. They're a mash unit sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know where you wanted to go right out of the break here, but I wanted to ask you a question. I think you watched a little bit better than I did.
Sure.
PJ Washington, interesting game. Just from
bad statistical game, but I don't care about that.
Can you talk about what you saw from him? That he played. That it's just interesting that the Mavericks have a guy that can do some of the things that he was doing on the floor tonight.
Well, he was a dog on defense. When you're guarding Victory Wembanyama, there's only a certain number of things you could do. Like Luka was getting visibly frustrated at how Wembanyama was being guarded, which was absolutely hilarious. Just kind of from a comparison point of view. But I thought he did a good job kind of digging into Wemby's height. Wemby really doesn't. I'm very confused by Wemby. He's an incredible basketball player, but he just like every 7-foot guy who can dribble, he just wants to play outside. He is not interested. Like, if that dude would just go catch the ball at 10 feet and turn and shoot, he would have crushed the Mavericks. And I think he did for a little bit. But I really like the way that PJ was on him. He's just a very disruptive defender. I don't necessarily know if he's a good defender, but he's fun and he's different than what they've had. And that is going to buy Dallas some time. I think the offense is already starting to freak out Mavs fans because his shot just looks busted. But I think what you've talked about for 2 shows in a row, his ability to dribble is going to matter. I will wonder what will happen during the playoffs. Like he's gotta make a respectable percentage. Like 1 of 6 is a little bit frustrating, but I like his motion. I like what he does. His passing was real nice. He had a nice dump off to Derrick Lively in the 3rd quarter that resulted in a dunk. There's just enough there to where he's gonna make I make the same. I'm Bill Simmons. I make the same references over and over. I think with some of these lineups with Kyrie and Luka, he can be kind of the 3rd heat in the Trivection oven that Jack Donaghy describes, because that ball handling really does matter. It really, really does matter.
Yeah, for sure. And it's awesome to have a player that has some defensive versatility that he's been showing in the last couple of games. And that was the thing, like when the trade happened, is most people, from what I've watched, and I'm, admittedly, I'm not here. I'm just going to be honest. I'm not sitting here grinding hours and hours and hours of PJ Washington tape, or I haven't watched a ton of Hornets games, but from what I've watched and what I kind of looked at after the trade is, and this is, not a unique thought, a lot of other observers have noted this, is he has the tools to be an impact defender. And the biggest thing in Charlotte was just consistency and effort. It wasn't that he couldn't play good defense. It's just that he just consistently wasn't. And when you're in a bad situation like he was with the Hornets for so long, it's like how much of that motivation and effort is coming because of something personal to him that he needs to change, and how much of it is the team situation. So that was always going to be the thing. Like when he gets to Dallas, is he cannot play with the same kind of effort level and disposition that he did in Charlotte. Like it has to be better. And I think that's shown so far for 3 games. We'll see how long it lasts, but I think his defensive intensity and his effort has been pretty good. And yeah, the shot is a little concerning. And I understand that, offense is probably the first thing that a lot of people look at that jumps off the page when you're looking at a box score. So I get being worried about it. The shooting, like I said, doesn't really concern me all that too much, as long as he's got the pump and go and close out drive and attack game. But there's a limit to that. Like he cannot be like a 30% shooter.
No,
like he has to be like near 34, near 35, which again isn't like, you're not you're not blistering the league with that number, but that's good enough for what he would do elsewhere on the court.
Well,
But he just needs to get that number up just a little bit more. He just can't be a guy that's 0 for or 1 for in these games, which, it's been 3 games, so we'll see. But the defensive tools, I mean, they've always been there. So it's good to see him kind of, that's the hope when you move environments like this, is it can recharge a guy. And I think that's him so far, at least on the defensive end.
yep. And what was also nice to see is that the Mavericks continue to look for him.
Yeah.
26 minutes, 1 for 6 from the floor, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 block, 1 turnover. I always keep an eye, I'm kind of keeping an eye more and more on guys who don't handle the ball turnovers, because that's just like an area where we bitched about Grant Williams. We got to be fair about everybody else. The Mavericks as a whole had only had 13 turnovers. This was like a low turnover game for both teams, relatively speaking, and then a low foul game for both teams. That's another reason why the game kind of flew along, like I was mentioning. Ooh, hello. God, I hate this ESPN auto ad play stuff. It just like blares into my headphones when I'm looking at something on the screen. This game is worth kind of talking about big picture. I also think it's sort of worth looking back to see, what we had been talking about in the previous, games and weeks. If I was very, very testy with the Dallas Mavericks during the Bucks recap. I'm going to see if I can find that one. But in the meantime, I want to circle back, I think, to like how the Mavericks finish, but I wanted to pivot slightly because the past 2 days have had some back and forth. I will just say that like we as Mavs fans quite correctly are already getting like pre-defensive about all things Luka. Just because like the discussion, Joel Embiid's out for the year, more or less. And so the MVP discussion has changed a little bit. And it always feels like that ESPN is looking for one reason or another to say why the Mavericks aren't it. First it was about how this trade is too much gambling for the future. And then there was like this the cryon was bad, meaning like the headlines on the bottom of the screen. But the actual discussion on ESPN about Luka and guys was more about like, why don't these players want to play with Luka? Meaning specifically, big old loser Spencer Dinwiddie and big old loser Kyle Kuzma. And the kind of takeaway from that for me is that Luka is just going to kind of continue to have an uphill battle. But there was one of my Twitter followers, I'm pretty sure he follows you and me both. Matt9 had a really fantastic tweet that just puts kind of the MVP conversation in a different context, and I wanted to talk about it. He said total missed games by each starter on MVP candidate teams. Jokic, he has Murray, KCP, MPJ, and Gordon. 25 missed games between those 4 other players. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has one of the Jalen Williams, Josh Giddey, Chet, Lou Dort. Total of 9 missed games this season between those 4 players. Giannis Antetokounmpo has Dame, Michael Beasley, Chris Middleton, and Brook Lopez. Total of 22 missed games between those players. Luka Doncic, and this is the what Jason Kidd said was the starting 5. Now it's probably changed, but let's just look at it going into this year. Kyrie Irving, 22 games. Dante Exum, 22 games. Derrick Jones Jr., 5 games. Derrick Lively has missed 18 games. 67 missed games. Almost 3 times as many as the next closest option. And that just changes the calculus of what we're talking about here. Luka's not going to be on a top 3 team if most of his team is missing games with him. That gets held against Luka, though, despite Luka continuing to show up and put up numbers. I don't think he's the MVP. I'm just going to be candid here. But I do think he's being downplayed in a way that's fairly frustrating to me from a media member point of view, but also Mavs fan point of view.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder how much of this do you think, like, Luka was so good so soon, and he's basically, I mean, his production is higher than it's ever been this season, but it's not like crazy far off from basically his second season. Like,
Mhm.
He's obviously scoring. He's scoring like 6 more points per game this season, which is kind of nuts when you're averaging 28.
Actually ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of like, he's been a first team All NBA player since his second season, and it hasn't changed. He's been first team All NBA every season since his second season.
He's gonna be it this
He's
year
going to
too.
be it again.
Yeah.
So, do you think that any of this is just like he just keeps doing it, and he's still so young that the novelty has kind of worn off? Because and again, I'm not talking like Mavs fans. I'm talking like how he gets discussed in the mainstream media narrative. Do you think it's because the novelty has worn off a little bit? He's not the fun, shiny new toy because he's been doing this now for basically 5 years, really, or 4 years.
Mhm.
And now his expectation level has changed. It's changed how people view like the baseline of what his performance can be. And also, like, isn't the way that the stuff goes in the NBA is like everyone always turns out to be the villain. Like James Harden was not like known as this like hated guy when he was like on the Thunder. Like people like I remember like everyone loved James Harden. Like it wasn't like this thing where there was like this passionate group of NBA fans or NBA media that just despised him.
I
And
mean,
I'm
there
not trying
were
to
in the
say
sense of like how he played and foul baiting, and
yeah.
that's like he was such an incredible free throw drawer to where it felt like he was breaking the rules.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to say like he didn't,
Yeah.
he's requested trades. Obviously that stuff hurts, but it just feels like the cycle for these NBA stars goes from when they're in their first year or two, it's like, oh, look at this, how precious, how new. And then it's like, okay, well, we've already talked about you for 2 or 3 years. We're talking about the next guy, unless you're like LeBron or Giannis when you
I mean,
reach that level.
there was an earnest push for Anthony Edwards, who is on, the number 1 seed. But you just scroll through Anthony Edwards' box scores, and he has nights where he has like 14 points and 7 rebounds, and like Luka can't do that.
Does
in
that
the Mavericks win.
first quarter.
Right.
It's just there's something about it where I almost wonder if he's just been so good so early that I don't know, people just don't seem as one like amazed by it. I don't know. I don't know. People don't need to be amazed. I mean, people can have the whatever opinions they want.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, national media is kind of funny the way it's talked about, because like when we were growing up and when we were in high school, I felt like what the national media was saying about your team as a fan mattered more because there just simply wasn't as many outlets to go through. Like nowadays, you could get whatever coverage of whatever team you want.
Yep.
You want wipe
Look
your
at us.
bottom, feed you a bottle, and tell you that your team can't do any wrong? You can get that.
You
Do
can
you
find
want
that.
your team sucks every single night? Doesn't matter what they do. They're the worst team ever. There's an avenue that someone's providing that to. Do you want something in the middle? Sure. Like the national media, like it creates these narratives, but in terms of as a fan, like that stuff is just becoming more and more like white noise to me, because like just look at our own Mavericks community. Like there's Locked On Mavs. There's
Oh yeah. We talk Mavs,
there's
there's Bibbs' podcast, there's Cousins, there's
SJ's podcast, Is Talks writing on D Magazine, like Dalton with Dallas Basketball. Like there's so much like
TGK.
Yeah.
Garcia kid.
There's so many good people doing good stuff that it's like that fill, and we all feel
a
like,
lot of the void. Yeah.
And we all feel like kind of what everyone would want out of team coverage, that it's like, who cares if Brian Windhorst says something stupid on an ESPN show? Like that's kind of where I'm starting to get, but I also understand because what they say, they still have some swing, and it kind of creates this negative feedback loop. But like, to me, I'm just kind of like over this kind of conversation about what the national media says, because quite frankly, like teams have better local coverage than like at any point in NBA history. I feel like dude, I wish there were this many options when I was 12 or 13 and I was watching Mavericks. Like my options were the local newspaper or Sports Center. Like that's kind of what it felt like back then.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think, I mean, this is a really big picture take, but like the LeBronification of everything has broken a lot of the way that the monolith, let's just not the monolith media, the ESPN, all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's so, do you remember the NFL campaign this year, the script writing, that really funny series of commercials? they're so funny because it was so ridiculous. That's why it worked, because it's just like, what ridiculous thing can happen in the NFL next? The NBA really does feel like a shittily written script thrown out during the writer's strike. I mean, the story today about, well, the Warriors made a pitch for LeBron, and it's like, can we not talk about this 40-year-old man who's going to play on the 10th seed again? And it's not that I hate him, but it's like, it's all downstream from there, because everything becomes about him and his trade desires, which then turn into every other national or a superstar level player of where's he gonna go next. And that's what frustrates us, because, Luka Doncic, his next contract could be worth nearly $400 million with the Mavericks. The next person who tells me that Luka is going to leave $1/10 billion to go play for another team, I just miss me with that. And so this whole conversation fires everybody up, because what we would like to hear about, and what I've been told about this, seriously, because I know people that work in like the numbers of the TV shows and that sort of stuff, it just doesn't draw numbers when you actually talk about basketball. But
That's
then
the problem.
But then, now listen to this. All Cities Network, Adam Mares, Tim Legler, their ESPN or their podcast has absolutely taken off the last 3 weeks. I know, because Adam is one of my personal friends and has been sharing with me their numbers. They're kind of incredible. The Dunker Spot podcast with Nikias Duncan and Steve Jones. I'd be very interested to see what their numbers are, because they dip into a lot of WNBA, but they talk real basketball. People that talk about the basketball that's being played. There is a market for it. I understand that there's a market for clickbait. My God, I go on Facebook, and some of the dumb shit that I get thrown my way, it makes the, when we used to get mad at Dalton for some of the things that he would put out into the universe, some of the insane stuff that's on there, like, there's just a market for it. You're probably right. But I still feel the need to address it from time to time, because I think it can be different. The fact that Tim Bontemps, who is honestly, Tim is a friend of mine. Nobody, some of y'all might not believe that. That's fine. Tim is a friend of mine. I talk.
Kirk is an NBA shadow broker.
I talk to it's just a thing. I talk to everyone. I don't know how that happened, but it's a weird thing.
Summer League, baby.
Well, Summer League, and then frankly, just like reaching out. My favorite was, we used to have this one guy who worked with us for like 6 weeks, and he kept reaching out to all these like high level NBA reporters and being like, "I'm so and so with Mavs Moneyball, Kirk Henderson's site." I'm like, "Oh no, don't ever do that again." And then we let the guy go. But this is like a long way of saying that, like, I still get frustrated. Bontemps talked to yesterday or today on the Hoop Collective podcast about how the MVP is a narrative award. That is so fucking stupid. It shouldn't be a narrative award. It should be about the basketball. Now, by and large, that usually wins out. That's why Embiid last year closed the season strong. There's a basketball argument for him winning the MVP. I'm not, he just did. He closed out stronger than Jokic. I don't like the results, but that's the way it is. With Luka Doncic, when I see like that straw poll, there's Jokic. Luka, I think, was 4th overall between like the 200 people that he polled. There was, I want to say it was Jokic. It was
Giannis,
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Giannis, then Luka. And I get the argument for all 3 guys above him. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about last is something, I guess there's a few things I want to talk about last. I'm enjoying talking to you about this. Sorry, we're kind of getting all over the place. Earlier in the show, my friend Harold said the Mavs are going to be a top 4 seed by season's end. I held on to this the whole thing because I think it's worth pivoting to. Luka can't be the MVP unless he's a top 4, top 3 guy. And getting to the top 4 seed is going to be an absolute insane mountain to climb. The Mavericks have won 6 in a row and are still in the 8th seed.
No, they're 7 now. They're 7.
They're 7. I'm looking at it.
By
no, okay,
points?
they're 7th. Yeah. But they're not going to climb into 6th tonight because the Phoenix Suns are going to win, and they've moved up 1 spot in the course of a 6-game streak. So it's really difficult for that sort of thing to happen, even though I see the vision, because you look at the rest of the Mavericks schedule and you're like, okay, if they don't let up off the gas, they could really, really push it. And so these things all tie in together. And I wanted to kind of talk to you and see what your feelings are, because this streak, the Mavericks were as recently as, like, they never fell to 500, thank goodness. But as recently as, what was it? They were 25. Yeah, they were 26 and 23 after the loss to the Bucks. They were 3 games above 500. Now they are nine games above 500 because they've won 6 in a row. And so it's like, how far do we really think they can streak? How far do we really think they can climb? And do we actually think they're going to climb there?
I don't know, because if you look at the West standings, this is outrageous. The top 10 teams in the West, of the top 10, 9 of them are either 7-3 or 6-4 in their last 10 games.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. Oh, and the other team that isn't is 5-5. So no team in the top 10 in the West has a losing record over the last 10 games. That is outrageous, and circles back to my point about how all these crappy teams that are at the bottom, like all these teams just keep rotating. Oh, they're playing San Antonio now. Oh, now they're playing Detroit. Like they keep getting these wins, and it's just funny. It's like inflating the win total because the bottom 3 of each conference is just such dog water.
Yeah,
that there's just so much congestion at the top of the standings because everyone keeps picking up these wins. So yeah, it's going to be tough. Look, they're 4.5 games back of 4th, and that's Denver, like the reigning NBA champions, who, when they kind of stop playing with their food, still look like the best team in the NBA. The top 4 teams in the West are all winning at a rate of like 56 wins or better. Like, do you think the Mavericks are going to get to 56, 57, 58 wins? I don't know. Of course, maybe some team in the top 4 falls back. There's can be injuries. We don't know. But those top 4 have been, except for the Clippers during the first like 7 Harden games.
Yep.
They have been outrageously consistent. Like they haven't had a lot of slumps. So it's not really against the Mavericks if they don't get to top 4 this season. I just think this is a pretty outrageous season. I don't know if that should be held against Luka, but I really do think that these win totals are getting inflated by these crappy teams. And it's just hard because historically, there are some outliers. Jokic was on a 48-win 6-seed Nuggets when he won his first MVP. Westbrook was on a 6 seed as well when he won his. But he only got it because he was averaged the first triple-double since Oscar Robertson. So they have to have, and Jokic was outrageous his first season he won MVP. Like he was just so much better than every other player that season. It's just otherwise, like MVP almost always goes to a team top 4 in either the West or the East.
Well, and someone in the comments,
nothing against Luka. It's just, this is a hard year. This is a really hard year.
Well, and something happened. Westbrook obviously won it not being a top seed. Jokic won it not being a top seed. The time for that is gone. Like that's just that's when Bontemps is.
Those were unique. Those were unique seasons.
They're unique seasons, unique kind of first time things. And frankly, it just feels like that it's going to be another 10 years until something like that is justifiable. And so I see the argument for me, and I think for everybody else, particularly in the chat and that listens on the show, you want to see the Mavericks advance in the playoffs, but you also want to see Luka kind of get rewarded. And that's where, for me right now, Luka is building a resume. And Ben in the chat said, I think I could see Luka winning MVP next year if he continues to build on what he's doing right now, closes the season hard. Because, I mean, like that's,
and presumably the team's also better.
There's an argument to be made that Luka or that Dirk Nowitzki's 2007 MVP when the Mavs went 67-15, his numbers were no different than the year before. It's just that the voters didn't know what to do with it. Like Kobe kind of was probably MVP that season, but I also thought Dirk should have won it in 2006. And sometimes these things just happen a year later. It is very narrative driven. It drives me a little bit crazy. I think it's okay in terms of Luka being hungry. I'm very interested in that. And I think he is. Like these guys look reinvigorated. They're going to go on a short break here. Luka's got to go to All-Star Weekend up in the wonderful city of Indianapolis. And then he'll fly to wherever he and his family go on a very short vacation. Though, Luka, I've got to tell you, vacationing with an infant, even as a rich person, sucks. I just
Learn
have
that
to
the hard way.
assume, like, there's no like having a tiny being to take care of is challenging regardless of social status. Kings won against Denver. That's interesting. Okay. So I don't want to like read my own article, but I am going to read this section. I wrote this after the Bucks lost 3 games above 500, 26-23. I said, at some point, the constant whinging about any given thing happening in a Mavericks game by someone associated with the team is starting to get to be too much. Whether it's an exasperated Luka Doncic at a given non-call, Mark Cuban screaming at the refs from his place on the bench, Tim Hardaway Jr. and Grant Williams barking above their stations, or the television announce crew vocalizing their frustration with the refereeing. It's becoming an epidemic. Of course, the only guy who doesn't get in the mix is the coach, is Jason Kidd, as he shares his disdain for what's been going on post-game and does so like a bystander who couldn't possibly affect the outcome. This team is frustrated, and so are the fans. Losses feel worse right now because this team clearly has something, but due to injuries and bad luck, it's starting to feel like we might never see what that is. But the only way out of some things is through them. The NBA season is relentless, and the Mavericks need to look in the mirror, pull themselves together, and close out the schedule strong before the All-Star break. Boy, howdy. 6-game win streak. Pretty fucking
accomplished. Take a bow. It's
well,
all because of you. You did it.
But it's delightful to see them not like buckle down. I mean, like, I think if we had a real criticism about this season, it was just woeful inconsistency.
Right. They just couldn't string together anything.
And they've really strung together. And granted, that's come with slowly improving health.
Right.
Those things are related. We talked about all that. I mean, again, it is so weird. I can't possibly. Yeah, David's making fun of me for reading my own writing. You're right about that. It is weird. But I wanted to go back because, I mean, as recently as 2 weeks ago, I felt terrible about this team, just perfectly honestly. And it's really nice to feel good about this team. I mean, by and large, this season, I have been positive about the Mavericks, and that is simply not my default. My my place is the skeptic. And I am really looking forward to seeing how this season closes out. Like, this is, we've been doing this together. You've been writing the site for 12, 13 years.
Yeah, summer of 2011.
I've been writing at the site since 2013, so 11 years. We've been doing the podcast together, more or less. You've been doing it longer than me. You started the own thing. We've been doing this since 2017-ish.
Yeah.
We really didn't start in earnest with the game recap stuff until like 2019. We were on and off. This season, thus far for me, is the second most fun one I've had doing all of this stuff, other than the run to the conference finals. I mean, this has been nice, and I hope they keep it up.
Yeah, I mean, dude, they won 38 games last season. Like, this is, I mean, I was my season prediction was 45 wins and maybe the 5th or 6th seed. So like, anything past that or anything matching that is absolutely gravy. So, and there's a rejuvenation with, I mean, the trade deadline, there's a renewed sense of purpose and energy. We've seen it. You commented on not just the team, but the fan base. Like, I know that it coincides with the Super Bowl and football season ending, and football fans and Cowboys fans and other things are like, oh, let's watch something else because there's no more football to watch. But also, like, people, I think the new faces are like, oh, like, this is different. Like, this is a different Mavs team than the one I am used to. Like, this team has a different disposition about it in terms of athleticism and talent and size that really, we haven't seen a Mavs team this young, this athletic, while still winning games. Man, since when? When was the last time a Mavericks team had this many plus athletes on the floor?
Never. We talked, like, that was a discussion in the Mavs party.
Yeah.
I don't like ever. Period. Like, Sean Marion was an incredible athlete. They've had Brandon Wright. They've had Green. What was his name?
Gerald
the dunk
Green.
contest. Yeah, Gerald Green. They've had some super incredible athletes, but never more than one at a time.
Yeah, now they got Washington, Lively, Gafford, Josh Green. Like, there's 4 like really bouncy, ultra athletic players that get up and down the floor. They've just never had that before. So, and it's something that the team has wanted forever. Like, when's the last time they've had a big man rotation, Lively and Gafford? It's legitimately either it's probably 2011 when they had Tyson Chandler
Yep.
and Brendan Haywood. Like, it's just been a long time since this team has had some stuff that's gotten people truly excited outside of, of course, Luka's.
Basketball is also
Brunson
played
was
differently. Like, that's the other part. Like, it was a mid-range game as recently as 12 years ago.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are seeing what they've built, and we don't know if it's going to totally work or not. But I think people are excited for this kind of newness that is the direction of the team right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. Well, we've talked too much, but I enjoyed this conversation. I don't think I'm going to do a post-game show. Maybe I'll do one here in a couple days. If I do, I will post about it. Just say maybe we'll have a live show where you guys come talk with me. You know what? Just one last thing. Shout out Jaden Hardy for another good game. He did have a good game. He also pump faked Wemby in the corner, got him off his feet, went and drove to the basket and laid it in. Probably one of the best moves he's made all year. It's really amazing.
He's been really good the last
He's been really good. Yeah, him and Josh Green, guys that I've wanted to exile, and looking good. Love it. Couldn't be happier to be wrong. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I have to go on a work trip, which is rare for me. Right after All-Star break, so we'll see sort of what shows, if any, we put up. I've sent some feelers out to different people that I'm friends with around the league, see if they want to talk Mavs. But I'm getting kind of the sense from a lot of media folk, they kind of treat the All-Star break the same way the players do, which is let's decompress before a stretch run. And I get it,
Yeah, for sure. We'll see where it lies. Maybe we get together before you go on work and just see what's going on. Probably, I'm see what Luka looks like in an All-Star game this year. I wonder if it changes.
I think I'm right about that. I've really been thinking about it because it's like it matters to me. And a lot of people are going to hate this take, but I think if fans go out of their way to vote for you, it's not just an award, it's an act. And you don't need to go play your ass off, but you do need to try a little bit. And like last year's in Utah it was really frustrating. Like, I tune in to watch my favorite player play against and with some of the best players in the world. And if you don't want to be there, don't go. I don't know. I feel very old man about this. Like, I feel like my dad called me the day after the Super Bowl and he was like really pissed at Travis Kelce. So it's like, maybe that's how I sound, where it's like, all right, can we just settle down, everyone? Maybe I'm wrong. That's always possible. All right. Well, this has been Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe of Pod Maverick and Mavs Moneyball. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We will talk with you guys later. Go forth and enjoy the rest of your week. Go Mavs.